Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Sniper Elite 5 in depth, where today we are taking a look at the Type 100 submachine gun, and I'll give you guys some attachment combinations to go with it. So without further ado, let's get into this. During the Second World War, submachine gun usage by the Japanese was fairly rare. They had purchased around 6,000 SIG-built MP-18s in the 1920s and 30s, which were used in the invasion of China in 1937, and they also bought 350 MAB-38s from the Italians in 1943. But it wasn't until 1944 that domestic submachine gun production properly got underway. After a few prototypes were made throughout 1939, the Japanese settled on an MP-18 derivative called the Type 100 in 1940, but no orders were actually placed as the attention had turned to Type 99 light machine guns, and there was no need for a submachine gun in the Japanese army thanks to the doctrine. A small handful of Type 100s were made in 1942, with some having folding stocks for paratrooper usage. As 1944 rolled around, the need for a submachine gun was suddenly realised, and large-scale production of a lower quality Type 100, known as the Type 100 44, was initiated. Compared to the old version, it had simpler iron sights, a simplified muzzle brake made by drilling 2 holes into the barrel. Welding was also very poorly done, and the wood used in the guns was often unfinished. Despite this, the Type 100 was largely reliable in the field, although the weak 8mm Nambu cartridge was no match for the 45 ACP cartridges the US were using at the time. Despite all the corner cutting, only 7,500 of the Type 100 44 style submachine guns were ever made, and they only ever saw action in World War II. In-game, the Type 100 is a passable weapon. It has a very high fire rate of 800 RPM, beaten only by the PPSH, and very low recoil, comparable only to the grease gun. Its spread accuracy is also very low, which is great. However, its damage is the joint lowest in its class, its reload speed is the slowest of any submachine gun, its aim stability isn't fantastic, and it has very poor handling times, which for an aggressive weapon is deeply unhelpful. And, to add insult to injury, the Type 100 is limited in customization options, having no muzzle, magazine, scope or rear grip options. Things are complicated further when you find that, aside from a few small downsides, the PPSH is a much better gun than the Type 100, featuring a greater fire rate, better muzzle velocity, more customization options and crucially better reload speeds. And here lies the issue. If you'd asked me when Sniper Elite 5 came out what the worst submachine gun was, I probably would have suggested the Type 100. And whilst that's certainly not the case anymore, thanks to weapons like the Gustav, the arrival of the PPSH has properly ruined any chances of the Type 100's redemption. Furthermore, the Type 100 really struggles against Jaegers and the hardier enemies of the game, limiting its use in the latter half of the campaign. Its damage is too low to really deal with them properly, which is a major downside that really hinders the gun. So between the damage that's a little too low and the poor handling and especially egregious reload speed, which is longer than the list of Rishi Sunak's failures, the Type 100 seems to have a lot against it. The accuracy is good on paper, but thanks to the high fire rate, it isn't as good as it seems. Think about it this way. The Type 100 has 8 cm of vertical recoil per shot, and can fire 800 shots in a minute. After a minute of sustained fire, which is obviously impossible thanks to reloading, but still, the Type 100's muzzle will have climbed 6,400 cm. The Welgun, on the other hand, has a much higher vertical recoil statistic of 11 cm per shot, but a much lower fire rate of 495 rounds per minute. After a minute of sustained fire from the Welgun, its muzzle would have only climbed 5,445 cm, much lower than a Type 100, and this applies to all accuracy statistics. So despite having theoretically higher damage per second, you have to fire much shorter bursts with the Type 100. At the end of the day, I don't hate the Type 100 at all, but I really don't feel like it's your best bet. I feel like the Thompson and the PPSH are both better choices. The Thompson does more damage, and although it fires slower than the Type 100, it is still substantially quicker than most other submachine guns. The PPSH fires so much quicker that it makes up for the problems the Type 100 faces, so I find it difficult to justify Type 100 usage. Now I want to go over two custom setups I have made for the Type 100, the first being a build focused on improving the weapon's accuracy. For my first attachment, I take the precision rifling, as I like to shoulder aim my submachine guns, and the precision rifling is a great way to help with this. The muzzle velocity penalty is also acceptable, as the Type 100 is a short-ranged weapon anyway, so it's not a huge deal to lose out on it, and it is definitely acceptable in the face of the improved spread accuracy. I take the magazine pouch on my stock to improve my reload speed, because as previously discussed, this is one of the biggest issues facing the weapon. It worsens my aim stability, but because this is a build focused on shoulder aiming, it doesn't matter. I also take the tactical Owen foregrip to improve recoil recovery and time to aim, once again at the cost of aim stability. Finally, the precision machined receiver further tightens up accuracy. With this build, the hit to muzzle velocity is unfortunate, but needs must, and thanks to the weapon's low damage and poor effective range, it really doesn't matter. You could also take match rounds to combat this if for some reason you need to use this thing at range. Match rounds on this setup will get the muzzle velocity back up to 368 meters per second, which, although a bit worse than the base muzzle velocity, is still better than the Sten and Well gun. Otherwise, the accuracy improvements are actually really effective at improving the weapon's lethality, as you can now fire longer bursts and keep more rounds on target for any given burst, really helping out the weapon and making it into a very effective killing machine. The improvements to handling and particularly reload speed thanks to the grip and stock modifications really help too, making the weapon more competitive in close quarters, which is where this configuration naturally shines, as a good submachine gun should. This is how I'd run the Type 100 in most scenarios, combining its great fire rate with a needed boost to accuracy. My second setup is designed to maximise the Type 100's damage per second by combining improved fire rate and damage per shot. For my barrel attachment, I take the overpressure power, as it increases my damage up to 46 points, which is more than the Thompson. It does increase recoil, but only by 1 centimeter in each direction, so that's not a huge problem. Once again, I use God's Own attachment, the magazine pouch, and the classic Tommy foregrip, which improves recoil control at the cost of aim stability. The overpressure barrel and the classic Tommy grip both absolutely ruin my spread accuracy, so this is an ADS build, as the Tommy grip only slightly worsens it, and it's worth it for the recoil bonus. Finally, the lightened bolt increases rate of fire up to 944 rounds per minute. This is a pretty nasty setup that generally really increases the lethality of the Type 100 in the simplest way possible, improving damage and fire rate. It also has lower recoil than the standard weapon thanks to the Tommy grip, which is really very useful thanks to the increased fire rate, the perils of which I discussed earlier in this video. Make no mistake, this is a dirty, short-range weapon for chewing up shotgun users and tight groups of enemies in the quickest way possible. The aim stability is a little worse for wear, but it's worth the sacrifice for the recoil control, and at the ranges you want to be using this thing, it's really not too much of an issue. It's not a precision instrument. The magazine pouch is also still absolutely worth it, despite its harm to aim stability, and overall, this is a really solid contender that can put a PPSH to shame if you use it right. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like, subscribe and comment. It costs you nothing and it's a great way to help out the channel. Stay safe and goodbye.